Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fat Muscle Project podcast. I'm John Gorman, one of your hosts today. We've got Lisa Franz in the house as always. Lisa, what's going on? How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Well, it's daylight over there, so we're I'm gonna ask you this every time. Where are you at currently? Are you in Germany still?
I am still in Germany. Yeah, I'm visiting a friend at the moment, but I'm still over these ways. The sun is about to set, but it is still daylight, so that's good.
Yeah. When do you head back?
Another 2 weeks, so for our next recording, I will be back in Bolivia.
Okay, you'll be on Central Time, so you and I will be on the same clock.
I'm looking forward to that, yes.
Perfect, perfect. Well, we have got a great episode lined up. You and I have wanted to have Bill Campbell on here. We've both done multiple podcasts with Bill, been at speaking events with Bill. I've known Bill for a long time, so this is going to be good. Real quick before we get to that, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see I have a tank top on that says Team Franklin CrossFit Games 2025. I do want to let people know because we'll be dropping this episode soon. Leslie has qualified for the CrossFit Games. She's ranked 21st out of the top 30 in the world in the 40 to 45 to 49 age group, which is just absolutely insane. We all know Leslie is an awesome athlete, but a bunch of people were all going to support her at the CrossFit Games, and people wanted shirts that were going, and other people that weren't. They were like, "Well, we want a shirt," so we made her this shirt. We're going to have that up on the Fat Muscle website for anybody that wants one. Everybody loves Leslie. She's just an awesome person. So this is kind of cool for her to have her own shirt. So stay tuned for that. We'll have a link up down here in the show notes, and that'll be on my social. But our podcast today, Lisa, you've done multiple podcasts with Bill. I know over because you've got your podcast, and we've been at the Fat Muscle Academy with Bill. When did you first start hearing about Bill Campbell, and when did you have him on your podcast for the first time?
Well, to be honest, I don't really remember how I started hearing about him, but I just remember he has been one of my favorite researchers in the exercise science and nutrition space for a really long time. And so at some point, I decided, or basically regularly with my podcast, I just reach out to 10 people or so that really fascinate me. And even if I think I have no shot and they're probably not going to respond to me, I just do it anyway. And most of the time, two or one out of those 10 does respond. And Bill was one of these very kind people. My podcast was quite small, or even smaller, let's say, at that point in time, like a year and a half ago. And he was like, "Yep, sure, let's do it. Let's set it up." The gracious person that he is. And so, yep, about a year and a half ago, he jumped on my podcast. And then I was so sneaky as well to say, like, "Oh, by the way, if you need someone to contribute to your research review at some point, I'm just going to throw my name in the hat." And yeah, lo and behold, a couple of months later, he was like, "Yeah, if you're still keen, you can contribute to the next issue." And so we've done that a couple of times. And thankfully, I have had the opportunity to meet Bill in person at the Fat Muscle Academy event in March, and he is every bit as nice in person as he comes across on social media as well, which you cannot say about everybody. So this is honestly, yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I met Bill. Well, really, we kind of got together the first time in 2017 when he was the president of the ISSN, and he asked me to come speak on taking your physique from good to great, insights from a diet coach. And at the time, there weren't a lot of people like me speaking at ISSN events. And I thought that was really cool, especially for a trailer park kid like me to be able to go speak at a scientific conference like that was huge on my bucket list. And then we had dinner that night that I presented, and Bill was like, "Hey, you do these crazy refeeds. I want to do a refeed study. Would you be interested in helping put that together?" And I was lucky enough to be able to write the diets for that. And we had a lot of other people that gave good insight. And that was the first refeed study. And we all needed to see that in the bodybuilding world. That was a big deal. And then since then, Bill has spoken at multiple events that I've been at, been on the podcast, this one now, or Elite Physique University. And I would say in the coaching world, he's your coach's favorite researcher, but even in the science community, he's probably your favorite researcher's favorite researcher because of just how humble he is and the fact that he is going into areas you're just not seeing a lot of research done on, which brings us to today. So Bill, that intro doesn't do you justice because you've got so much more about you. I just want to give people the kind of the context on how we know you. But if there's anything that we left out that you'd want to let people know more about you, because you're really, most people understand like the fat loss and muscle gain research side, especially with women, and you've been really the guy in that area for a long time. So if you don't mind adding some more to that, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you both for the the great introduction. I could hear that all day.
Yeah.
Um, so just to kind of give a perspective on how I view my research, you have some researchers that are pioneering in what they do. I don't look at myself as a pioneering research, at least not historically. Now, I'm going into an area that I think is that has not been done before. But essentially, what I've done throughout my career up until this point is I love the bodybuilding lifestyle and I love the coaches that work with clients. And whether they're competitors or people like myself and my wife who we want to look like bodybuilders but not step on a stage. So essentially, I have a huge network of coaches, and I just think, or I ask, or I notice, what are they doing? What are they talking about? What are they doing with their clients? That obviously has, it's bro science and there's no research. So what I do, I come behind what they're actually doing and I test that in my lab or in a lab-based setting to either validate what they're doing. So we can just name a couple of these: flexible dieting, diet breaks, diet refeeds, which you collaborated on with. Right now, we're doing a reverse diet study, high versus lower protein intakes. So again, I'm the coach's scientist who will come along 2 or 3 years after it's all, where everybody's doing something, and I'll test, hey, is this really beneficial? And now my lab has very much shifted into a menopause fitness space. And now for the first time in my career, I can say what I'm doing is actually pioneering because nobody has looked at a menopause fitness population. Thousands of studies on menopause, hundreds of studies on fitness, lifting weights, cardio, dieting, but nobody, to my knowledge, has merged middle-aged women going through menopause and a fitness lifestyle. So, with that, I'll just talk about what we're going to be working on in the next month, really getting these studies approved because my team's coming back. So, my team is mostly master's students and undergraduate students. So, I don't have a research enterprise where I employ a bunch of people. I have very smart students, far smarter than I am. And my job is just to get them motivated. And to my surprise, I thought, hey, when I switched to menopause fitness, well, that's going to be just a death wish to young college age students. To my surprise, no, it's been awesome. So a couple of the studies that we have on the horizon are, and again, we have to appreciate that the way that I'm going to do this is by design introductory level. So we have to acknowledge no research in this area. So I'm just going to do a simple descriptive study, or what some people would call a case series study. So what we're going to do, and John, you know about this because I met some of the owners of one of your companies, Premier U.
Yeah.
So that company of yours is kind of serve as like the hub of this, but it's not just limited to that company. So what we're going to do is once we get these studies approved, and we're going to work on that basically through the month of September when my students are back, when we can get these submitted for approval. What we want to do is get middle-aged women going through menopause who are already, living a fitness lifestyle, lifting weights, tracking their macros. If they're going to start hormone replacement therapy, estrogen, progesterone, or if they're going to start testosterone therapy, or if they're going to start a GLP-1 for fat loss, what we want to do is get them before they start and get baseline blood work, baseline body composition data so that we know, okay, this is pre-intervention. And again, we're going to work with their coaches on this. So coaches that have these clients, you just you don't change anything. I'm just coming along, my team and I are coming along to document these body composition changes that are going to be potentially impacted by estrogen, testosterone, GLP-1s. So essentially, just give us your history of dieting, your macros, your training splits. Now that you're starting this every few months, we'll ask you to get blood work or we'll ask you to get another body composition assessment. So again, this has been done, 1,000 times in a young, healthy population. We don't have any of this data in a menopause fitness population. So that's what we're doing in the near future.
Yeah, wow. It's going to be groundbreaking. I know we've got a lot to get into, Lisa, and I want to turn this over to you, but Bill, something that just popped up, and I don't like any kind of negativity, but I do want to ask this. To be someone who is more of a pioneer or who goes left when most people are going right, I'm not up to speed on the research community. Is there any kind of pushback when you start going into an area that's not really been studied, as far as other researchers go? Because it seems to be like anytime someone does something different and outside the box, there's going to be pushback. Have you received any kind of pushback? Is there anything like that, or is everyone right there with you, cheering you on, saying, "Hey, we need this"? I'm not sure what the research community is like.
Oh, no, that's a very good question. I'm going to answer that through two different perspectives. Historically, I didn't get any pushback because again, I'm not challenging anything. We all know that high protein is better than low protein, but
Right, right.
nobody ever researched that in resistance trained females. My lab was the first one to do that. Since I've made the change to menopause fitness, I've gotten more negative comments, more um, and part of that is just because, and you can just think of, I don't know, feminists or whoever, like, who are you? You're a man. Who are you to tell us? So never before did I get that. And most of my research is in females, but I never really got that kind of pushback before because nobody would study females. It was the kinesiology research is like 90% or more male, male, male. Well, my lab was one of the first to really focus on females solely, or at least always include females in our resistance training studies. So I have that group of people, which I don't even really take seriously because it's like you complain when there's no research, and not you complain when there's going to be research. You can't,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't win. Um, the other thing where I've gotten the most pushback recently from more scientists is my acknowledgement, and I'm just going to say an acknowledgement that weight loss resistance may exist in this population, this middle-aged going through menopause transition. And again, I can appreciate the people who say, nope, that's made up because the research really doesn't really, there's no validity to, there's no evidence that weight loss resistance occurs. So I'm being what I think is a good scientist. If I hear this anecdotally 100, 1,000, 10,000 times, and I talk to all these coaches who say I can't make progress with some of my female clients, well, a good scientist would challenge the norm of a caloric deficit in this population. So that's what I'm doing. And more negative feedback on that front, like, why are you why are you even acknowledging that this exists? I'm like, because I'm a scientist and
Yeah.
we should. So that's another study we're going to be doing also. We're going to try to test this in a laboratory setting.
I bring that up because, when people come along and they challenge things or they start to become, somebody that's leading the charge on something that's not yet studied, there's going to be things like that come your way. And the people that can shoulder that and let it roll off their back, those are the type of people that, I'm thinking 5 to 10 years from now, we're going to be looking back on the things that you're doing, being like, thank God he did this, because, the potential doors that this opens to help people is just massive. And Lisa, that's probably a good time for me to quit talking and turn this over to you, because now we're going to get into why Bill wanted to make the switch.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this was the perfect transition. Bill, I was going to literally ask you, like, what interested you about this topic? Because just like the people that are pushing back, like, oh, a man, first of all, like, why are you interested in this topic?
Yeah, so I'll say before I had the light switch go off, for years I'm talking about, fat loss, dieting, and I would have plenty of women reach out and just tell me, this isn't really working. And I would just, and again, these were always women 40s, 50s, and I don't want to say I blew them off, but I didn't. I was like, well, yeah, it works. Like if you diet, it works. So I didn't really hear them. Then the light switch was my wife, who is, I don't know, 53 years old now, I think. She went through menopause and she gained, not only did she gain um, a lot of weight relative to her. So I always have to make that. So a lot of these women that are going through this, they gain 10 pounds, 5 pounds, maybe 15 pounds. And a lot of people think, well, that's not a lot of weight. But when you embrace a fitness lifestyle, and let's say you're 130 pounds your entire life, and now all of a sudden in 1, 2, 3 short years, you gain 10 pounds, 15 pounds, to that person, that is a lot of weight. So that was my wife's situation. And me being a fat loss researcher, and I have access to people like John, so I have access to the best coaches literally in the world. I really struggled to help her lose body fat during this phase of life. So knowing that who has uh, I spend more time reading. I've published more studies. I know more coaches. I'm struggling. I should be the last person in the world to struggle to help somebody lose body fat. Now, an N size of 1 doesn't make anything true, but it was enough that it said, hey, I've done enough studies in young, healthy people where if you decrease their calories, they lose fat over and over and over. But why is it that I'm struggling with helping my wife? Why did I get all these messages for years and not really take it seriously? So it was my wife's experience and just my pure curiosity. And let me also say, I don't, if I had to guess right now, or if I had to articulate what I think's going on, it's not that a caloric deficit won't help a woman going through menopause transition. A caloric deficit won't help her lose body fat, but it does seem like the extent to which she has to reduce her calories and the length of time that she has to do that make it very unsustainable. That is not what used to be the case in these women's lives, pre-menopause. The normal caloric deficits would work, and now it takes a lot more energy or a lot more of an aggressive approach to get the same result. That's what I'm thinking right now. And why does that happen? I don't know.
That's why I love your term, as you were saying, weight loss resistant. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about that in a minute as well. But resistant to me just means resistant, like driving a car with the handbrake on or something like that. It's harder. It requires more energy, more measures. You're not saying it's weight loss impossible or weight loss, like it's not possible at all. But yeah, I'm curious at that stage. So when you started becoming interested and started running your first studies, etc. What was the current state of the research, or was there any research that existed in that area at all? I mean, you said there was minimal, or was there any?
I don't, I couldn't, I nor my team, plus I've asked my social media followers, I'm like, tell me what I'm missing to give me any study with women who embrace a fitness lifestyle where they've gone on a diet, where um, they've tried to optimize their physiques. Now, again, you guys work with this population, so you know more than any scientist because we don't have data. So this is another reason why I'm so excited. All of the data that exists in menopause, it is in a population that is not who we work with. It is not women who have been lifting weights. So I think of this. Here's a context I like to put this in. If I think of my mom, or even women not as old as my mom, but if you go back 20, 30 years, there weren't nearly as many women in the weight room. It just didn't happen. So when I think back to when I was in college, undergrad, there were two girls. I know their names to this day because it was rare to have women lifting weights in the 1990s. This is when this was. I remember their names to this day. So now we have these women that have been lifting weights for 10, 15, 20 years of their lives. And now these women are now going through menopause. And I think at scale, it's something is going on because they're like, wait a minute, I've tracked my macros for 10 years, or you would be surprised how many fitness professionals reach out to me. Like, I'm a coach and I help other women and I am struggling. I get a ton of them. So we don't have research. So all of the research that we have related to menopause, to some extent, we can say that it doesn't apply to these women. And since you guys are both coaches, here's something that I want to ask both of you. I wonder how much of this weight loss resistance is these women have really watched what they've eaten for so long. You know, they've tried to resist excess body fat gain, so they've reduced their calories, they've worked out, lift weights, do cardio, count their macros. I wonder how much of this struggle is, I'm just sick of doing this for so many years and now here I am. Yeah, it's a little harder, and that could just be age. Everything's harder when you get older. Everything is harder when you get older. I also, again, if I as I try to be balanced, like, hey, I don't want to just assume that there's something physiologically that's causing this resistance. What if it's possibly I remember I used to lose weight really easily when really they didn't. They just thought it was easier and they were just more consistent. And now their tolerance for the grind is just less. Do you think there's anything to that?
John, you
I,
go.
I can answer from a trained individual perspective. So here's my thoughts on this and the people that I know, my clients. I actually find it's the opposite in trained individuals. Now, my Gen Pop people that come to me, and Gen Pop, I would say it's the mom of three. I always use this example: the mom of three that she's in her 30s, maybe she's worked out a little bit off and on, but she's had some kids. She wants to lose 20 pounds and feel good again about herself. I'm not talking about that individual. In trained individuals, the people that have been working out in their 20s, 30s, and even 40s, they're more motivated to keep going because they know it's now harder. So at least from my perspective, it's those people. It's Lisa that's training hard now. She tracks all her food. Like, she goes out, she eats clean, she does all these things. Lisa in 10 years, when you're early 40s, mid 40s, she's probably going to be even more disciplined because she knows what's coming. So I don't think it's that. I think it's more. Well, I'll get into the comparisons here in a little bit because I want to throw weight loss resistance and menopause into two categories and talk about that. But Lisa, if you've got something else to add there, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say so. Where I have seen this weight loss resistance happening most of the time was scenario number one. The person that was able to get away with quite a bit of flexibility in the past, in the sense of, yes, maybe tracking macros, etc., but incorporating alcohol, more flexible foods or more processed foods, but staying within the macros, eating out from time to time, but yeah, not being like eating quote unquote super clean or so. And then suddenly noticing at that point in life, oh wow, all the stress has piled up. Maybe they're dealing with a stressful job, they have the kids to deal with, and they do drink their alcohol every second day or so, and suddenly their body is not tolerating that anymore. So the body is just more sensitive. That's kind of scenario number one where I have seen that weight loss resistance occur at that time. And scenario number two is with people that have dieted, yo-yo dieted or whatever a lot. Maybe not necessarily yo-yo dieted, but also in the sense of like just over restricting calories and overtraining for a long time. And their body is just like under high stress and high cortisol anyway. And then throw in all these other hormonal changes where it's suddenly starting to rebel. And I think that undernourishment, and on the other end, or on the other side, that overflexibility and having more toxins in their body from alcohol, from environmental toxins and processed foods and so on. In those scenarios is really where I have seen that weight loss resistance most often occur.
Bill, I wanted to throw something out here real quick before we get into the meat and potatoes. Here is as a coach, here's how I've started to kind of look at menopause and weight loss resistance. So I have a lot of, and I'll just use females for example. I have a lot of females in their 20s and 30s that are experiencing weight loss resistance due to chronic dieting, chronically high stress. And it's that, and we've talked a lot about this on the podcast. It's that chronically elevated cortisol that starts to drive down progesterone and it starts to drive their testosterone down. And then when cortisol is high, then blood sugar and insulin usually over time are a little bit higher too. So what that does is that's where hormones changes the calories in, calories out equation to where now you do have to go a little bit lower calorie than you normally would. And that's just a classic weight loss resistance, overstressed person in their 20s and 30s. To me, I see the exact same thing happening in menopause, except now these women don't have a choice. This is coming, this is happening. So I'm actually looking at it kind of from that perspective, except now we have to think about, we've got access to hormones and we've got access to all this, the research coming. So that's kind of how I look at it. So when you said that, this is something that hasn't been studied in the coach's world. We've been seeing the weight loss resistance side. This to me is just another form of it. It's just an inevitable form of it.
Yeah,
That's the way I look at it.
really good point.
Yep. Good.
Yeah, Bill, I'd love for you to actually like take us a little bit through what is happening throughout the menopause transition in terms of hormones, as we are speaking about hormones anyway. Like, what can we tell someone who's listening, maybe also the men listening that don't necessarily have that background idea of what's really going on throughout that time?
Yeah. So I'll start with physiologically or morphologically, what's happening with the body, and then I'll tie in what some researchers are attributing these body composition changes to. And the first thing is there's a debate about what I'm about to say. There are people who say menopause is not doing anything to the body. It's the body's changing, yes, but that's just aging. And it's not related to the menopause transition. You have other people who would suggest that no, menopause itself, the menopause transition itself, is what's causing these body composition changes. And it's very hard to crown a winner in this argument because you cannot separate aging from menopause. When you go through menopause, you're getting older. When a woman gets older, she's going to go through menopause. So it's very hard. So my opinion is informed by research that has been best designed to answer the question. And it's from the SWAN study. So that study of women's health across the nation. It's a massive study, a longitudinal study. So they followed women over many years, specifically during midlife. So there's not a better study, in my opinion, to study changes during the menopause transition than the SWAN study. You have other studies that are just longitudinal and they're just aging. And those studies pretty much always say there's no difference with menopause or not. But they were not designed to answer the question, is menopause causing body composition changes? The SWAN studies that I'm referring to were designed to answer that. And what they have reported is approximately 3 years before menopause. And let's just make the numbers easy. Let's say it's a woman is postmenopausal at 50 years old. It's actually like 51, 52, but just to make our numbers easier. So about 3.5 years before 50. So on average, a woman who is 47 years old, she becomes perimenopausal or starts the menopause transition. Two things happen. One, she starts to lose muscle mass for the first time in her life. So up until this point, she's gaining muscle. Now she's starting to lose muscle. Not very much, but the trajectory is clearly lower. And that backs up what we know. Every decade, usually, I think from the 40s onward, everybody starts to lose lean mass. The other thing, and this one is quite robust, is there's an accelerated rate of fat gain. Now, again, you look at 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, there's, regardless of the longitudinal study, people gain body fat. But this research says specifically this 3 years period before becoming postmenopausal, there is an accelerated rate of fat gain. And there's something I would say, I don't need to be told that because I've been told by thousands of women, I gain all this weight in my midsection now, and I gain weight pretty quickly. So I've heard this anecdotally for just my whole, anybody who's in fitness hears this. It's not just, you don't have to be a menopause researcher. So then a follow-up to this study also reported that it's not just that women are gaining accelerated levels of body fat during this 4 to 5 year period. Again, for most women, it's late 40s, early 50s. Now, let me also say some women go through this in the early 40s, some go through this in their late 50s. It's not, it's variable, but on average, we're talking late 40s, early 50s. Not only are they gaining an accelerated rate of body fat, but the distribution of this fat is non-uniform. So what's happening is more of the fat gain is being deposited as visceral body fat and in the android region, and less body fat is being distributed or being added in the gynoid area. So let me say that differently. They're not only gaining fat, but there's a non-equal distribution of this fat, meaning that more of the fat is being deposited in the midsection, less in the glutes, quads, hamstrings. So less in the lower body, more in the central abdominal region. And we call this male pattern fattening because males typically have more central fat. Females have more fat in the lower body. But the menopause transition changes this morphology such that they become more male-like in their fat distribution. So that's what's happening morphologically. So says the best studies that were designed to answer that question. Now we have to ask why. What's going on endocrinology to explain this? And most researchers will point to two hormones in particular, a decrease in estradiol, estrogen, and an increase in follicle stimulating hormone. And they both make sense. Follicle FSH is responsible for helping to secrete and release estrogen, and estrogen, once it's released, will then lower FSH. So if your ovaries stop producing estrogen, now the brain, which is going to release follicle stimulating hormone FSH, it's kind of like, well, I need to keep pumping out more and more and more so that the ovaries get the message to give us more estrogen. So it makes sense. The less estrogen, the more FSH. So when I first was learning about this physiology, as it relates to body composition, I was immediately excited because, okay, I'm a fat loss researcher. We know women are gaining fat on average. And let me also say, not every woman is going to gain fat during menopause. Some women go through this and it's a breeze. They don't gain, they have high energy. They don't even have a bad experience. Other women have a horrible experience, and they gain a lot of weight. So I don't want to give the impression that every woman's set up for a doom and gloom experience. Not the case. But for those women that will experience this, I became excited because, well, if we know that estrogen is declining in the body, which it does, that's the menopause is where you don't produce any more estrogen from the ovaries. I was thinking, okay, and if that's the reason that these women are gaining body fat, well, then this is a beautiful example of hormone replacement therapy. If we give women estrogen to prevent this decline, now we're going to prevent this accelerated rate of fat gain and this male pattern fattening and all these things. So to me, it was simple. But when I read the research and when I have conversations with women, it's not simple. And what I learned, what the research tells me, is exactly the same thing that I see in society or in our culture. Women who take estrogen therapy, some will lose body fat, some will gain body fat, and some will have it will have no impact. So I don't know. I can't again if it was only the estrogen that was causing the lack of estrogen, if that was causing this increase in fat, in body fat, then clearly supplementing or getting HRT, estrogen therapy, would prevent this increase in fat or help them to lose body fat. But that is not a predictable outcome. It's highly variable.
Wow. Yes, there's so many things to follow up on here, but I think it's the main thing that stuck in my head is that throughout this transition, um, fat and muscle distribution, alters or is different than before in the sense that we're more likely to store more body fat, especially in the visceral area or around our organs in the midsection. It is harder to build muscle or to, we're more likely to lose muscle even in that time. And that's mostly due to the decrease of estradiol and an increase in FSH. Is that correct to kind of as a summary, so to speak?
Yes.
And yeah, it does sound a little bit doom and gloomy, but I know that there is a little bit of an upside to that as well, or that you probably have some recommendation or some advice as to what people can potentially do in order to at least minimize how they're feeling throughout that time. Do you have anything to recommend here?
Yeah, so I go back to foundational principles. So let's say um, somebody notices, oh, I'm gaining body fat. I'm in my late 40s and I'm noticing an increase in body fat. Well, I don't think we abandon everything about fitness and nutrition that we know. Guess what? If you overeat, you will gain fat, whether you're 20 or 48. It's just that maybe now in this midlife transition, the amount of body fat from overeating might be more severe than what it was when you were younger. So we have that. I also want to suggest one other thing here. Sleep deprivation is the highest of a woman's life during the menopause transition. And we have plenty of research, some of the best design research that reports if you are sleep deprived, you are weight loss resistant, you are fat loss resistant. So if sleep is not optimal and we can correct that, that may solve a lot of the weight loss, fat loss resistance phenomenon that we are seeing. But sleep is, and again, before I started reading this research, I appreciate, yeah, you want to sleep. And I'm sure you guys as coaches, you know this. But until I read the research, I'm like, holy cow, your diet, your exercise, and your sleep are the three major pillars
Mhm.
of an effective fat loss phase. So I go back to, and Lisa, this is something you said earlier, which I 100% agree with, even though I can't cite research. It would seem to me that the principles are the same. So we want to make sure we're not overeating. We want to make sure that we're trying to build muscle or at least not lose it. But it seems like there's a need to be more buttoned up with all of the variables. So one would be alcohol's a big driver, not a big driver. Alcohol is something that a lot of women during this phase of life, when they eliminate it, now they are suddenly able to lose weight again. Even those that count their calories. Ultra processed foods, 20s, 30s, early 40s can get away with them. Now it seems like, and I do not want to be an elimination person. I don't like being that person. But if I'm going to be honest, eliminating as many of them as you can is going to help you become less weight loss resistant. So limiting alcohol, limited processed foods, and doing all the other things. And I would even set this as kind of like an expectation. You may, whether it's a reality or it's a perception, you will have to diet twice as long and twice as hard to get the same result as you think you had when you were, in 20s and 30s. That may or may not be the case, but I almost like setting that as an expectation. And I think, John, you said that earlier. People, and we know that things are hard. I'll tell you this, I'm 50. I used to be a lot more active. I used to just naturally be more active. I'm constantly getting injured, and all I do is lift weights, and I'm constantly working around with some type of injury. Right now, my shoulder's messed up just from lifting weights. It's not like I'm out,
Right.
playing baseball. So it's just those little things.
Yeah, and you brought up sleep, and especially in menopause, the way I look at it from my end is, one of the first hormones that starts to tank is progesterone for
Yes.
women, and that's highly tied to your sleep quality. So, in stressed individuals, even a female and it's 25, if she's super stressed, that starts to drop her progesterone, which then impacts her sleep, which drives her stress up more, which drops her progesterone more. So yeah, it's a vicious cycle. Lisa's, taking her hand in a circle. If you're listening, it's a vicious cycle. And there are things that can be done. You can take chaseberry, like New Ethics. There, we make a chaseberry, a liquid chaseberry liposomal. Take that to help naturally boost your progesterone. So you try and gracefully go into these stages because they are coming. Progesterone is going to drop and it's going to tank. And at that point, hopefully you've got a good, like a nurse practitioner, kind of like Jordan at Premier U, like she's our go-to, that can prescribe 100 or 200 milligrams of progesterone that just get your sleep quality back on track, so you can control all those things that you said, Bill. Like, you were spot on. Like, these things that we have to control as we go through this transition helps women kind of go through it more gracefully than just not taking anything at all. So, I mean, there's so much meat on the bone that, we need to do multiple podcasts on this topic, but, you know, we're real big on sleep here. So I just wanted to point out, like you said, it was very interrupted in its lowest point for a female. I believe that's why, because it's so highly tied to progesterone. And stress, super anxiety, progesterone and anxiety. Low progesterone means more anxious. So, like, women listening, they might experience that. So there's so many things that go on here. It's just, we all thought our parents were crazy. I thought my mom was crazy. They're like, well, you got to get through it. And now it's like, no, we can actually get through this gracefully. So there's hope for people out there listening.
I think that's a very positive message for sure. And I want to add to your recommendations, Bill, as well, because I also remember in one of your more recent research reviews, you were talking about or looking into a study concerning the Mediterranean diet. And while obviously, again, neither you, I, nor John were not dogmatic and were no elimination diet people at all, but to the point of tightening things up and just being a little bit more precise when it comes to the quote unquote clean eating. I do think orienting yourself sort of along the guidelines of the Mediterranean diet in the sense of plenty of fruit and vegetables and maybe some legumes and some salmon, like those healthy fats and so on. That seems to be very beneficial from my read of your wonderful research review.
Yeah, well, I think I think I was picking your brain at John's last event. I think about so yeah, you're an inspiration to some of the content things. So thank you for sharing what helped, where some of your experiences with a whole food diet, a Mediterranean style diet. It's um, yeah, that diet, and now next month's issue, I talk about the study where we have this fat redistribution, and I talk about a supplement. Well, it's not a supplement; it's a postbiotic called urolithin A, and I'm
Mm,
very excited about
yeah.
that nutrient. And people that follow a Mediterranean style diet, particularly that eat berries, walnuts, just whole foods, a lot of fruits and vegetables, particularly certain fruits, they're going to have a natural production of urolithin A. And again, I'm not going to suggest that it's a fat loss agent, although in rodent data, it has been shown to be an anti-obesity nutrient. But it's a really good for mitophagy, for just improving cellular health, and for people embracing a fitness lifestyle. Um, it seems like it's a real deal. And there's a lot of research on this. I'm just highlighting one of these studies.
Yeah, I mean that's another great or another great news for the people listening. And I want to go back to something else that you said earlier in regards to potentially losing muscle or it being harder to build muscle. So maybe you can speak on, is it possible to build muscle throughout menopause? If so, what would you suggest for people listening that don't want to lose muscle or maybe even build muscle throughout that transition?
Yeah, so one thing, and again, you guys are the coaches, so I would defer to your expertise. But one thing that I feel like I'm constantly telling men and women that are in their 50s and they're complaining about, oh, I can't, I'm just killing myself in the gym and I just can't gain muscle. And I said, well, let's appreciate something. If you're maintaining your muscle through your 50s, you are way ahead of the game. People lose muscle. So again, if you're working and maintaining, we have to appreciate that is a win for you. Now, again, I don't I don't like to lift weights and not build muscle. I just so I get where they're coming from, but we do have to appreciate when 98% of the other people are losing muscle, you're winning by keeping it. Um, People can absolutely gain muscle through menopause, and the only way that that's going to happen is by resistance training. However, um, I, I'm aware of research. Well, let me say this. While I can't say that estrogen, and I'm going to use estradiol, which is the main form of estrogen, while I'm not able to say that is a fat loss hormone during menopause, I do feel comfortable saying that estrogen is an anabolic hormone for women going
Yeah.
through menopause. The research is directional. And what I mean by that is the research has one of two outcomes. It either will report women gain muscle or that they don't lose muscle. You never see that they take estrogen and they're losing muscle. Now, don't forget I'm partnering with John and Premier U where we're going to start tracking this in real time. So all this research is generally in women who aren't lifting weights. Um, one study that I was able to find was that they gave two groups of early postmenopausal women. Half of them got a placebo patch, the other half got an estradiol patch. The same resistance training program. The women taking the estradiol patch, I think it was zero point 0.1 milligram patch. They gained a significant amount of muscle mass compared to the placebo patch. And again, that was a randomized, double blind study, the best quality research. That was the best. And again, we have other studies, but estrogen is anabolic. So if you're serious about your fitness and your muscle building and you're going through menopause, there's a reason that you should consider estrogen therapy.
There's also the other side of this too, one that's not talked about enough, and it really scares women, and that's testosterone replacement therapy because testosterone is one of the three, and it goes right for most people. I would say 9 out of 10, it's going to be low for most females from what I've seen. And when I have a female that I'm working with that, we've done everything we can. She's taken hormone optimizer and Cordy's and maximize, like all her sleep is there and everything's done the best she can, but the testosterone levels are just tanked, right? And they're just to that point to where because it inevitably happens, then you go on TRT. And a lot of women are scared because, well, one, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of cancer, testosterone replacement therapy causing cancer because that's been shown not to be true. But when I have a female that starts TRT at a normal dose, I tell them, get ready because you're going to gain muscle extremely fast compared to everything you've experienced the last 5 years because your testosterone levels and hopefully your free testosterone levels are going to be in a good place. And I will feed them more over the course of 12 weeks, knowing that we're going to put on more lean muscle mass. Now, they don't turn into men and they don't get just giant and huge. Like that's not going to happen. But all that hard work that's been going in the last 5 years, when levels typically aren't in a great range, now all of a sudden, for my clients, they're eating high protein, like you preach nonstop, Bill. We all do. They're eating high protein. They're not dieting. I make sure that we're not in a deficit during this time. Let's take advantage of this. I've got a lady that just came and visited me, one of my old clients. She came and visited me last week. She's on a low dose of TRT and put on 6 pounds, and she was nervous, but it's all muscle. Like she literally gained all that muscle over the course of a couple months. And that's just how powerful that is. And there's so many good things that come along with that. Your metabolic rate goes up with more muscle mass, your strength goes up, like all these things can be impacted. So I will say that, and I know that this episode's not about that, but TRT is a very important part of this equation that we'll talk about more, I'm sure, on a future episode.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're again in partnership with Premier U. That's going to be its own study,
Mhm.
just because you talk about divided opinions.
Yeah.
That HRT, estrogen, progesterone, yeah, that has some this, but testosterone. Now, one thing that I've noticed just in my lab when I compare most of my research is in younger women, and I haven't done a lot of blood work, but I'm personally not seeing a big drop or any drop from my menopause females to my younger females. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think everything that you said is true. When you take TRT, again, the women one that we're testing in a different study, they do gain muscle. And I hear a lot just like energy for like
Yeah.
a lot more energy. But that's one thing I'm going to be as part of the when we're creating this study and getting it approved. I want to know how much, because estrogen kind of falls off a cliff over a few years. Progesterone tanks. I don't I don't know if I don't think testosterone does I know it doesn't to the extent of the other ones, but it's something that I'm excited about learning about. And if you have, again, it makes sense if you have these women who embrace a fitness lifestyle and they're lifting weights, testosterone makes sense for this population.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned of several things that you're excited about. Obviously, the collaboration with Premier U and the studies connected with that. And I think it was before we started recording, you mentioned that you've got this huge menopause survey that you're starting to evaluate as well. What else are you excited about, or what other sort of closing thoughts do you have on the whole menopause topic for us?
Yeah, so we did the first ever menopause fitness survey. We closed that. We had over 4,000 respondents. This was
Wow.
for pre-menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause, four main sections. We had a body composition, weight loss resistance section. We had a nutrition section. We had a fitness exercise section, so resistance training, cardio, and then we had a hormone replacement therapy section. So we're going to publish each section. It's going to be its own paper. So right now, we're working on the first two papers. Um, I have a statistician. She just sent back the general data. But when we're looking at I didn't even look at the HRT. Well, I will share this because we did a preliminary analysis and we presented this at a conference, the ISSN conference. Um, Let me give this some context. So the general population of women, based on a study from 2024, they reported that about 5% of women now take hormone replacement therapy. And let's just make the assumption that that's mostly estrogen and progesterone. Our study, so 5%. Now, it used to be much higher, it used to be about 25% in the late 90s. And then there was a study called the Women's Health Initiative, which really scared a lot of people from hormone replacement therapy. Our survey study, which again is very specific to fitness women, they had to be resistance trained to get into the study. Not 5% of postmenopausal women taking HRT. Ours was 50%.
Wow.
So, and I'll tell you, when we publish that, that will literally be groundbreaking because that is so far off the charts. And again, we have to acknowledge that in science, we call it selection bias. So the women taking our survey, one, they were following me on Instagram, following you guys on social media. So there is a selection bias. But regardless, if there's something about women that lift weights that are much more receptive to taking hormone replacement therapy. And again, that's probably not surprising to us, but it will be to every other scientist that's in this menopause space, because I don't think they can appreciate, well, yeah, they probably take more supplements. They're more open to taking things to optimize their performance.
I
But
will say I am surprised by 50%. I would have thought it's more around about 30, sort of like a third of the people, but 50, that is surprising to me.
yeah, especially when again the other data says 5%. Now, one thing real quick, I don't know if that 5% did that capture this influx of compounding pharmacies. So that's going to add some that probably went more undetected. And I know a lot of these women do get are getting their hormones through compounding pharmacy, so it might not be like an FDA pill, so to speak. But even
Understandable.
accounting for that, it was much high. I could not, but like I have the data. These are the women, and I didn't analyze this yet, but like what dosage, what delivery, is it a pellet, is it a oral, is it a patch, cream, all that stuff. We got really good data.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, overall, thank you so much for today's conversation. John, is there anything you want to add or another question you want to ask?
I just want to implore our listeners to go to the show notes and check out all Bill's contact information. Watch his Instagram page. It's one of the best Instagram pages on the platform. He's constantly doing the questions. I love because you'll ask, hey, is this true, yes or no, and like you have to scroll and you always learn something. And he's always reaching out to see if somebody's interested in like the menopause research and stuff like that. But I also have a link up in the show notes to view his full presentation that he did on the Fat Muscle Academy on this topic in detail with the research. And like we go so much farther into that than we did here on this podcast. And it's a high quality video presentation with the PowerPoints. You get all that. Anyway, go check out the show notes. Bill, we really appreciate you having, the time. I know it's summertime, so we tried to schedule this for you in the summer because it's about to get batshit crazy for you like it typically does during the school year. So we appreciate you. We definitely want to have you on to talk more about things, especially as we start to do things in collaboration with my company, Premier Utelemed, with Brandon and Greg and Jordan and you. That's going to be really fun. So we'll definitely have you back on for a future episode. Is there anything else that you want to say before we close it down?
Um, no, no, just thank you. Thank both of you. I have a ton of respect for both of you. I know, Lisa, you've been a contributor to my research review. I love, I'm just waiting until the year. I don't like to burden you, but I love learning from both of you. You guys are two of the best coaches that I try to get my information from. So just a lot of respect from me towards both of you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate that. All right. We hope everyone's enjoying their summer. For myself, Bill, and Lisa, we're out of here. See you guys.